Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 5:30 in the morning on a Friday. I am recording 5:30 in the morning on Friday. That's when we draw a toy from the toy box, a random object from the Random Object Randomogrifier. Let's spritz these watercolors real quick, make sure they're nice and juicy for later on so that when we get to that point, I don't have to scrub them. I can just tap, tap, tap them. Nice and moist, juicy, creamy. No, today well, every morning at 5:30, we pull a random object out of the Random Object Randomogrifier. And today we have it is the Diplodocus skull. Now, I don't know if it's Diplodocus or Diplodocus. I've heard it said both ways. And when I asked the Google machine how to say it, the Google machine said that both ways were used, but that one was preferred in Britain and one was preferred in the United States. I know that in the movie Jurassic Park, he called it Diplodocus. I'm not too keen on how to actually say the name. So I called it Diplodocus my whole life. Somehow, somewhere back in the 80s, I heard the word Diplodocus, and I've said it ever since. So I am quite comfortable calling it a Diplodocus. We're going to do a quick block in here. I want to make sure this thing is an odd shape, and I want to make sure that I have room for everything that it's going to do, that I want it to do, and the shadow. I think I probably need to move it forward just a little bit. Just that's the point of the composition phase, is to make sure that everything's going to fit where you want it to go, and to put in the anchor details. So you can see that it's going to fit now. We're ready to go. Diplodocus lived about 140 million years ago, 147, 150 million years ago. I mean, it's not an exact science on dating stuff that's that old. You can't, it's not like you can go back and cut them up and count the rings, or ask them their birthday or anything like that. But you can look at layers of rock and you say, okay, well, this is volcanic ash from this incident, and this is, seabed from this incident. This has a carbon dating signature from this incident, and so you can get it, within 10 million years or so. 10 million years is a lot, but they think it was about 147 to 150 million years ago that Diplodocus roamed the North American plains. Is it Minnesota, Wyoming? Somewhere around in that area. There were a bunch of them. There were a bunch of sauropods. These are sauropods. Sauropods are the lizard foot is what sauropod means, and it is the long necks. A long neck. And of the long necks, Minnesota, my mom says it's Minnesota. Sauropods are of the sauropods, Diplodocus is one of the longest, if not the longest. Certainly the longest for its size. They're about 85 feet long. They've got little peg teeth for stripping underbrush. They just pull the underbrush up with their little peg teeth, and they only have them in the front, so they didn't chew their food, which is probably why they're extinct. You're supposed to chew your food. 85 feet, that's a you know, to put that in perspective, that's approximately 121 bananas, or a third of a sphinx. Because, you know, anything but metric. A third of a sphinx, that's bananas. They don't think that these things raised their heads up like giraffes or brachiosaurs. They think that they swept their head from side to side and ate in an arc. And they're not positive that it was dry food, that it was on land. It could have been in wet areas. There was a lot of wet areas around, because it doesn't make sense for them just to eat with their heads doing this, because they couldn't, their necks weren't flexible enough to go back and lick their own shoulder blades, so they couldn't curl back and eat a big circle of food. They could only sweep an arc. And that is, you know, that's not, to me, that's not a very efficient way to do it. But, you know, nobody was consulted. Nobody consulted me. Nobody said, hey, Blade, you know, hey, we're about to make this big, yeah, it's about a 200-degree arc. Mom's reading my notes. It's about a 200-degree arc without moving their head, without moving their body. And, you know, the argument is these things weighed 12 tons. And if you've got to move 12 tons every time you want to take a bite, that's a lot of energy. So moving your head in an arc to eat, you know, there's an argument saying that conserved energy. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's the answer. But wouldn't it be just as conservative of energy if they could curl back and eat the food that was closer to them and move even less? It's the fact that they couldn't curl their head back around to them that makes me question the effectiveness of eating in an arc. But again, nobody consulted me. Nobody said, hey, Blade, what do you think about this? We're thinking about making this really long-necked dinosaur. We're not going to let it move its head. What do you think? You think that's a good plan? Because I would have said, I mean, can it whip its head back and forth? Well, no, not really. Well, can it lick its shoulder blades? Well, no, not really. I mean, what's the point then? All right, I think we're in a good part there where we can move to the first layer of ink. Yeah, and their heads are really small. Of their 121 banana length body, their head is only 3 1/4 bananas. Or about 2.5 feet. If you're in the Americas, it's 2.5 feet. For the rest of the world, I'll put that in perspective for you. It's 3 1/4 bananas. Because their heads are really small, and they didn't think they thought they were, at first they thought they were all just juvenile heads. They couldn't figure out why there were all these juvenile heads with all these really long necks. You know, where are the adult heads? And then they started putting them together and they saw that they fit. But of all the definitive information they give you, the part that we all have to keep in mind is there are no complete skeletons. There are a bunch of incomplete skeletons, and there's a bunch of conjecture. Carnegie had them put them together in, and it's Andrew Carnegie, not Dale. had them put together in the museum without consideration for the fact that they didn't have a complete skeleton. So he made them make forms off of other dinosaurs, apatosaurs, brachiosaurs. Had to make forms off other dinosaurs to fill in the gaps. And so there are no completed, like none of the skeletons you see in the museum have the actual end of their tail. All of the tails were, the tip of the tail was imagined. So while they have this very long tail, that last vertebrae, the last few vertebrae on there are not necessarily the vertebrae of the dinosaur. Which means that, for all we know, they had lasers on the end of their tails. We have no way of knowing what their tails were. These could have been the ones with lasers on the ends of their tails. We just don't know, right? A creative license. Yeah, exactly. We just don't know. These things could have been, these space dinosaurs, these Sleestaks, if you will. These things could have been the advanced civilization, and they're trying to hide it from us. I love talking about stuff like that. I know it's far-fetched, but it's terribly, terribly funny to me. I giggled when I wrote it. Can't talk, Harding. I think I've had all the important lines on here that I want. I think. Bananas, that's crazy. That's bananas. All right, let's see. You know what I forgot to do is draw in this outline here. When they put them together, one of the mistakes Carnegie's museum made that spread across the world at the time was they put them together in the typical lizard sprawl. Lizards have their shoulders to the side, and so their elbows stick out like a cowboy or a lady at a party, and their knees function the same way. And Andrew Carnegie had them assembled that way, which is considered now incredibly inaccurate. Their legs obviously went under their body. There's no way they could have lifted their breastplate up off the ground. But they thought, with this nasal hole in the top of their head, they thought that these things lived in the water and didn't have to lift their sternum up off the ground. But if they had walked on the ground with the design that they initially built them in, they would have dug a trench with their sternum. There's no evidence of that anywhere. So once they put the legs underneath them, they saw the shoulders and the hips worked much, much better that way. And so they figured that out. But they also initially put the neck up like a swan instead of straight out forward. And they had the tail dragging the ground. And if you picture all the scenes of the Loch Ness monster swimming in the water with their little head up like a swan, that's kind of how they built this thing. And I'm thinking there's a landlobbed Nessie is what this is. This is what Nessie would have looked like on the ground, huh? And obviously they got it wrong. They went back and they fixed it and they put the hips back in the way they're supposed to go. But they make those kinds of mistakes and then they come back and they tell you, yeah, but we got everything else right. You made a pretty big mistake there. What are you trying to say that you don't make mistakes? Because that's, if you're not willing to admit the mistakes that you did make, how am I supposed to trust you on all this other stuff that you're saying is absolute facts? I mean, you're really keen to say it's 150 million years ago, and it looked like a lizard. It looked like a lizard. I mean, you kind of got that fact wrong, and you're not willing to say, oh yeah, we don't know everything. You just want us to buy into everything else. Science is settled. No, it is not. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Where were we? Do do do. They had a hip nerve. They had a hip nerve bundle. They used to say that it was a second brain, not the Tiago Forte second brain. For all you productivity nerds out there, I am a productivity nerd. I like to read all the productivity blogs, but not that kind of second brain. They believed that this was a second brain in the back because they're so very, very long that it took a long time for, if anything stepped on their tail, it took a very long time for them to react. That they wouldn't feel it in enough time to get away from it. And that's possible because if something's eating your tail, you only have a split second to react. You only have just a split second to react. And that if you've got to wait for that signal to get all the way to the top of your head from the end of your very long tail, then there's a really good chance you're going to get your tail eaten off before you do anything about it. And so for the longest time they called it a second brain. It's not really a second brain as much as it is just a bundle of nerves, but that bundle of nerves is reactive to stimulus. So, or they believe it was reactive to stimulus. Which means that like again, if something bit into their tail, they would know to whip their tail back. Subtle hint. What is the subtle hint? Somebody in the chat saw the subtle hint. I think it was my mom. She's the only one. I think my mom's the only one chatting. If you're here and you're signed in and you're watching, drop a line in the chat. Let us know you're watching. Let us say hi to you. Also, if you'd like to draw along, there's a link. There's a permanent. There's a what do you call that? Oh, I made the link in the chat a sticky note so that you can pull up the post where this is posted on my YouTube community page. So you can pull that post up and you can see the picture that I'm working, the picture that I took of what I'm working with, and you can play along if you'd like. let's see here. How are we doing on time? Oh, it's already 5:50. We better get a move on. Shoot, yeah, we better get this going. Dun, 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 dun. My mom says it's a fast 30 minutes. I think you're right. When you're having a good time, time flies when you're having fun. But now my conjecture, I purely conjecture because I'm not a scientist and I haven't studied these things. I obviously don't have a time machine. But my pure conjecture is I think it's the best of both worlds. I think these guys lived on the edge of the water and used their heads, their long, super long, unflexible necks. I think they used them to reach out into the marsh and get food off the shore. I don't think they sat up on the land and swept from side to side on the land. I don't think there's any evolutionary benefit to that. I don't see, my little mind can't comprehend any evolutionary benefit to that. So let me dry that real quick. There's my dad. My dad's in the chat. Hi, Dad. There are 4 or 5 different members of the Diplosidae family, which is the family that Diplodocus is from. There are 4 or 5 different dinosaurs that are in. There are 4 or 5 different families 4 or 5 different examples of the family, but they are completely different from all of the other long necks around there. Their cousins are the brachiosaurs and the apatosaurs and the other things. But Diplodocus, the thing that is killer for me is Diplodocus is only in the North American continent. It's not in Europe. Like Brachiosaurus is in Europe and Eurasia, but Diplodocus is not. Diplodocus is only found in North America. And that's interesting because the time period that Diplodocus was around, the 2 continents hadn't completely separated yet. The dinosaurs were still walking back and forth across the land, but it was separating. The Americas were moving west. From Eurasia. And so it was in the process of separating. And while some of the animals did just continue to go back and forth, these guys were so specialized where they were that they didn't cross back over, which to me is that's the evidence to me that they didn't just stay on land and sweep their heads back and forth. Because if they had just stayed on land to sweep their heads back and forth, they would have been on land going back and forth between continents. To me, that's the evidence that they had to stay with the marshes. And it's all conjecture. There's nothing anybody knows other than the fact that there are dinosaur bones in the wilderness out there. You can look at the dinosaurs. They find the stones in the stomach area where it looks like they might have swallowed stones to help them digest their food, which suggests that they were eating sticks. But they don't find enough of those stones to make it definitive, to say, yes, this is exactly what they were doing. They only find enough of those stones to say, hey, this suggests that. But I think I'm going to call that one. I like it. What is today? Today's the 25th. Oh yeah, let me do this real quick. But the fact that they didn't go back and forth to me is the key information. While all of the other animals of the time period are found on both sides of the world, these guys didn't go back and forth, and that to me is the kicker. It says that they were specialized for the marshes that they were in and couldn't wander too far away from their food source. They were successful. They were around for several million years. They were successful, and there were millions of them. They were a successful animal, but I just don't believe they could leave the marshes. It's the 25th of July of 2025, and I am me. So, okay, that is what I did this morning. Let's see if we can look at it next to the reference photo. Not far off from the reference photo. Let's see it from my perspective. Start by turning this microphone off, because otherwise it'll sit there and drain the battery looking for a source, and then I can stop the recording and I can safely eject. I found another phone to take photographs with, and we may be able to do that tomorrow. It was dead. I had to charge it, so that you wouldn't have to look at my arms while I tried to. Okay, this is it from my perspective. Pretty close to my perspective. This is what it was like from my perspective. Why that's not focusing? Usually that just focuses right on it. All right, so that's what I did today. Hopefully you did a sketch also, and if so, please add it to my community, and we can look at it and talk about it together. Fun times. I got an egg for tomorrow. Hopefully the little girl will be back Saturday and she can pull an egg for me, because it's tiring to have to pull my own eggs. So let's see what's in this egg. Oh yeah, exactly what everybody wants. Booty. It's a treasure chest. Yeah, that's a nice one too. I'll use a little booty in our lives. It says treasure chest. Shake your booty. Anyway, so this is what we're going to do tomorrow, the 26th, Saturday the 26th. If it's Saturday the 26th and it's 5:30 in the morning, before 5:30 in the morning, then you're watching the trailer, and this is what we're about to do. So stick around, we'll get started on it. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This is my favorite part of the day. This is when I get to come down and get to art with my besties. I look forward to it every morning. Be sure and tune in tomorrow, same Artistic Biker time, same Artistic Biker channel. And then we dance. We dance. We dance till somebody says they see me dancing. Because when somebody says they see me dancing, then that means that the black is caught up with